I'm Bob Wilhelm, and I'm a storyteller. Today's story is about a remarkable person, St. John of God, San Juan de Dios, who lived at the beginning of the 16th century in a Spain that had been transformed by traumatic events. The expulsion of the Jews and the Muslims occurred at this time. The destruction of the last Islamic nation in Spain occurred at this time, and the discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus, commissioned by Queen Isabella of Spain, all turned the world upside down. Some of these events are truly tragic, such as the expulsion of Jews and Muslims, the Moriscos and the Conversos. They had been anticipated, actually, 50 years earlier, when something traumatic happened in the east. The city of Constantinople fell to the Turks. The Christians in that empire, in that city in particular, were massacred, sold into slavery, and many fled. And so it would be repeated. This time the Jews and the Muslims would flee. And where would they flee to but the city of Constantinople, which had gone through something similar 50 years before. But there was a time, because of the great energy of what was happening in Spain, the rise of a new nation of people, a unified nation, and the beginning of a strong national identity, that there were conquistadores who went out to the New World and made a fortune. And there were also people with great religious conviction and vision who appeared. And if we look only at the dark side of what happened then, such as the Inquisition, we neglect the brilliant side of what happened, because that's what happens in history. In some of the darkest moments, there are people who arise who affirm the good, sometimes to the point of their own lives. We think of the Holocaust in Germany in the Second World War, and even in that evil, that unspeakable evil, there were witnesses to what was good and true who gave their own lives. But to go back to the time in Spain, Juan de Dios, who was actually Portuguese and a son of a Converso family, so his roots were Jewish, is a character who is a strange candidate for sainthood. We know of St. John of the Cross of Spain. We know of Teresa of Avila. We know of Francis Xavier. We know of others, perhaps Francis Borgia, and others who were incredible people who were giants of spirituality in their own age. And Juan de Dios is one of those. But why is he called John of God? Aren't all saints of God? It's a strange title, and the story reveals the reason why he received this name. The story is also about a very complicated event, an event of a breakdown, a mental breakdown that Juan de Dios experienced. It was at a festival, the Feast of San Sebastian, January 20th in the 1530s, when a great preacher, another saint, St. John of Avila, came and preached most likely on the Gospel of Paul and on the image of being a fool for Christ. And Juan de Dios, who was so troubled and who had such a traumatic experience as kidnapped from his own family, his mother and father at the age of 8, never seen again, he never saw them again, living and working in isolation as a shepherd for many years, becoming a soldier in the army of the Spanish emperor and fighting the Turks in Eastern Europe, living a life, and when he returned, of hawking books and being a peddler, and then running a printing press, and all these things covered up a great internal struggle, a struggle that led him to break down at this church event with the preaching of preacher. The subsequent turnaround is one of the most amazing stories. What happened to Juan de Dios, I think, was because of the wisdom of the preacher, who saw him later on after he had been committed into a mental institution, an insane asylum, which in those days was just a brutal prison, where the treatment was the beating of the insane, hoping to cure them, and dousing them again and again with cold water, hoping to bring them to their senses. It was terrible. But in the midst of this, Juan de Avila meets privately with this man who had gone insane, and is the instrument for the return of sanity, and not only just the return of sanity for Juan de Dios, but the achievement of a transformation, a psychological transformation, and a spiritual, we might say, transfiguration, because this is also a story for the Feast of the Transfiguration. The turnaround, the amazing transformation, leaves Juan de Dios as a man who's called the Father of the Poor, who is a person with incredible compassion, who sees Christ in the face of everyone who is poor and ill and sick and dying, and the rest of his life he spends nursing them, creating an open hospital. A man of great generosity, a man willing to take great risks, a man who achieved so much, most likely because he had been filled with demons. And when those demons were exorcised, so to speak, and he was healed, all that energy, all that suffering, all that experience, all that pain is transformed into a great outpouring of a new energy, a tireless energy that focuses on his love for ordinary people, especially the poor. So I invite you to listen to the story of an amazing man, Juan de Dios. I'm Bob Wilhelm, and I am a storyteller.